we have the frets in and we're ready to go for the next stage, which is to shape the neck. On the plans I have the front, side and back views of the neck. The neck is slightly tapered from the top to the bottom. Now you can adjust this to suit your own preference. I've suggested a thickness to start with and to see how that feels first. It's like a cross between a C and a D neck, close to a violin, just a bit wider. Obviously it's a little bit wider than the violin. There are several tools that we use to shape the neck. The traditional method is to use a spoke shave. I like to use the draw knife to take away at least the waste part of the wood. See, once you get down and once you've taken away the corners, you can then use other tools like a small hand planes. I've got a really cute little, this is a nice little plane I picked up recently actually. These aren't too expensive. These are very good for taking off and shaping the neck. Once you've taken away the waste, you can use a sanding block to shape the neck to how it feels best for you. To thickness the neck, we're going to use the disc mounted thickness sander. This is an 80 grit standard sandpaper with the center cut out, otherwise you have like a swirly pattern. This is just being glued with contact adhesive to an old faceplate. This is a 5-inch faceplate from an old drill lathe I had from 30 years ago. We mount this for placing this in the pillar drill. We can thickness the neck to whatever size we want underneath it, so we can adjust this up or down. This is a very useful tool for thicknessing the necks before shaping. You could make one of these from a piece of plywood and a bolt. You've got to be careful to have a gap between the edge and the sandpaper, because if you catch your hands on the edge of the sandpaper, it can hurt. You can cut yourself. We rest this on a 3mm piece of timber. So this is at the lowest point. We raise it, and it means at this point here is when we get to this point over here, we have some space to go down. So this will go down no more than 3mm because we've set the drop. So it's only taking off a small amount, but the good thing is it's a nice even taper. One end, nothing by the very far end, all the way down to here, down to 3mm, using the razor. Using the spoke shave with the flat side down, just to take off to the pencil line. This is just the edge of the board from the back. And now I'm going to reverse the neck so I can work the other side. Okay, so once we've taken off the initial corner, we're then going to work our way gradually. We'll save this middle part for the very end because we're trying to keep a nice curve. And we're basically just taking it one more level down on either side. So in this case, we'll be We're not finessing it at this point in time. We're just trying to remove the wood before we can start working on it. Once we're happy with that, then we can move on to things like scrapers and sanders. Looks like. At this stage. This wood works very nicely, so I can so we're gradually getting it rounded. There are different shapes to the necks that we can use in terms of shaping the neck. Classic mandolin style D neck is my probably preferred for this kind of instrument. But many people find that a flatter, more C-shape, or is it called a D? A flatter neck like you have on a classical guitar. That's another option. Some people really go far and have a complete V-neck, which I don't find as comfortable. I've got a mandolin that has a V-neck, but it depends on your hands. This may fit you perfectly. You may prefer a flatter or a rounder neck. You can even do a perfectly semicircle neck. So you can do a semicircle, which is more like a modern modern electric guitar sort of neck, which is very rounded. So you've got the deeper sort of baseball bat feel, a V-neck, or the flatter, or a flatter profile neck. I say I'm going for somewhere in between all these. So a good roundness, but also a good depth at the bottom. To keep that, we're not going to touch this area here until the very end. So we're going to work on trying to make this curve. And again, we won't touch near where the frets go. You could also use a larger hand plane to do this. So we're working between the pencil lines to create a nice rounded shape. I'm trying to avoid areas like sideways for the moment. Again, with our smaller plane, you can really get into the because this neck is poplar, I wouldn't carve this as thin as I would a dense maple or a dense mahogany one. To work this end of the neck, the grain is working against us a little bit here. The best way to do it is turn the neck around and to use the Whittling knife. Again, we're still keeping to those pencil lines if we can. The grey may be in different places, so we have to be conscious and only take away a little bit at a time. So we're working towards that comfortable shape. It's starting to come here. Where possible, always work with a knife away from you. If you have to bring it close to you, make sure that the knife is going to stop against something else other than your thumb. Here the grain is kind of against me, so I'm going to turn it around. Just going to mark on the center line reference point, 6 millimeters either side of that. Okay, so we don't want to touch this point at the moment, but this bit here is fair game. Already you can feel the difference in the neck, even at this rough stage. If your shaper is scraped, this is a card scraper. If you've got it sharp, it will remove shavings as well. So you can use that in places where a plane can't go. It's actually removing quite a lot of wood here. I turn the light away, work in shadows so you can see. Okay. It's really nice if you can do a lot of the work without using the sandpaper and take the excess stuff. The sandbit card scraper is doing most of the work on this wood. And so this is tulip poplar. It's a relatively soft wood, but it works well with sharp tools. Now we've got the shape, we're going to work to that center line. We're going to leave that center line all the way along the neck, but we're going to get rid of this extra line here. I can really start to feel the difference now. By holding the neck, you can feel where some areas are more squarer still than others. Up here, you can still feel there's a bit of a square edge there, still needs to be rounded over. Here, it's coming on nicely. You can do most of this by feel. Now, when you feel ready, you can then move over to sandpaper. I've got an 80 grit for rough sanding and 120 for the main sanding, but again, at this point, you may decide actually it's still too thick, or it's still clubby, and you want to make it a little bit more rounded. That's where the individual attention to detail comes in. So with a wood like this, I'm not going to make it too thin. It's a single piece neck, so we want to keep it reasonably thick, no thinner than 21 millimeters up here, and we're going to keep the full thickness at this end where it attaches to the body. So we're not having a heel as such here on this piece of wood. It's just gradually going to become rounded. So at this point here, we're going to keep that bit, but here, this will gradually disappear. Of course, keeping that center line intact right to the end. When we get to the end, we'll be sanding this with a long piece of sandpaper, but we've still got there to remove. You can feel on that's good. That's perfect there. Here we still need to move that corner. There's a bit of corner there, and here there's a bump. Here there's a bump. So we just keep on scraping, and then scraping and sanding until we get to that point. The neck has been scraped round now, so it's still quite full down the lower end, and it's starting to be closer to where I want it at the top end. I've still got to do some final sanding here, which I'll probably do with maybe with a bobbing sander or with a knife and file. So that needs some fine tuning. There's still a bit of shape there that could be improved. I've gone over the middle line now. I'm trying to blend it all in, blend all the curves in. It's hard to see the shape sometimes, and it helps to have you shade. See if there's any inconsistencies in the shape. Use your hands. Your hand is a good indicator. So I'm going to take a 120 grit paper and a cork block. Just blending in the shape. And we're going to keep going. Take some finer scrapings. Sanding, you can see the imperfections if there's any. Taking very fine shadings at this point, just blending in any areas that are rough. There's some places here where there's a knot, I think, and so for that one I'm going to actually use an 80 grit paper. There's a small knot here, just to blend this in. Now we can go back to the 120 grit and we're happy with that. A sharp Morrison knife can also be used like a scraper. You can actually scrape and blend in the cuts from the sanding and the other scraping. This bit here needs work. I could do this on the bobbin sander, but at this stage I don't want to over sand. There's only a small amount of wood that needs removing here. If we could do it with a scraper, that's fine. A file will do this, specially shaped sanding block. Again, this is 120 grit paper. If you've got more to sand off, you could use a thicker grit, like 80 or 60, to shape. Okay, we've got this the shape, reasonably rounded. We're going to fine tune this in a minute, but first of all we want to do a double check. Just spray some water on the back of this. This has had a few bumps and knocks, and we're just gonna let the wood expand a little bit. We're just damping the back of the neck to let the grain expand before we sand it further. So we'll then sand it again with the same sandpaper, and then we'll go finer. So we've allowed the moisture to dry. I've gone over this. What I now suggest is you start the regime of, we're going to work our way in the sandpapers from 180. We've done 120 grit all on the neck. Now we're going to do 180, 240, and finally 320 on this particular popular. On some woods we would go to 400 or 600. Once we get to 240, 320, that's about right for applying the oil. You can also use the same bobbin sander, wrap the sandpaper around it, and use that to finish the head to get into that curved part of the headstock. And you can do the same for the sides as well. Follow the grain. Main thing is the neck should feel smooth in the hands. It's up to you where you stop in terms of grit. I would carry on going for another, and certainly with oil varnish, you don't want it to be too smooth. You need 320. I'm just going to do by hand. When it comes to applying the oil finish, we don't need to apply it to this area here. We're going to stop short of this. We're not glue the neck in, but we will apply the varnish just up to the neck block where it goes into the body. We'll do the head, and we'll do what we did with the fretboard. We'll do 3 coats, space 1 every other day. Okay, we're going to apply a coat of PolyX oil. You could use Danish oil, boiled linseed oil, or shellac for this purpose. Again, this is just for a very light, tiny amount on. The good thing about oil is if there's any imperfections or any dings later on, we could just sand back with some wire wool and carry on the varnishing. Because it's a cigar box instrument, we're mostly concerned about how it feels in the hand as much as how it looks. But it is also nice to make a neck that makes you want to play. So anything we could do to make the playability as well as the feel nice. This 3 coats of this sanded back with a bit of wax is very nice in the hand. I'm taking a rod, this is a piece of spruce. I'm actually just going to burnish the neck. This is compressing the fibers. You don't have to do this, but I find it makes the neck feel even more silky. And we carry on just wiping any excess off of the oil. We don't want any extra. You want 3 very light coats on this neck. Already. Very silky sheen already. Helped by the burnishing. So we're going to do this away for now. Don't want any air getting in. We'll come back tomorrow, put the next coats on. Just need to leave this now overnight.